There's a kid sitting in a classroom right now, staring at a clock, waiting for a bell to ring. That kid has no idea that for 99% of human history, that classroom didn't exist, that bell didn't exist, that teacher at the front didn't exist either. And yet, every generation before us managed to pass down everything they knew. Languages, skills, which plants would kill you, how to track an animal across miles of open land, how to stay alive. So when did humans actually start teaching each other? Not when did we build the first school, that's easy. The real question is, when did the first human decide what they knew was worth handing to someone else? The earliest evidence isn't a building, it's a tool. Stone tools going back 1.5 million years show something remarkable. Not the tools themselves, but how consistent they are, generation after generation. The Acheulean hand axe, found across Africa, Europe, and Asia, was made the same way for hundreds of thousands of years. That kind of consistency only happens through direct teaching. Someone watched, then made one, then showed somebody else. That was education for most of human existence, not a classroom, a demonstration. A kid watching an adult's hands, copying, failing, trying again, corrected not with words, but with a hand repositioning their fingers. Around 300,000 years ago, Homo sapiens shows up, living in small bands of 15 to 50 people. The elders were the library. Want to know which plants are safe during a drought? You ask whoever survived the last one. Knowledge lived inside people and died with them unless someone passed it on. Mostly it was passed on through story. Anthropologist Polly Wiesner studied the Jew hoansi people of southern Africa and found that 81% of their nighttime conversation around the fire was storytelling, myths, ancestor tales, moral lessons wrapped in narrative. That was the original curriculum. Not a room, a fire. Not a teacher, a voice in the dark. Evolution built us for this. Chimpanzees are nutritionally independent within a few years. Humans take 18. That's not a flaw, it's the design. Our long childhood is a dedicated window for learning. Every other species learns to survive fast. Humans learn to accumulate. You can see what that accumulation produced. Around 100,000 years ago, at Blombos cave in South Africa, archaeologists found shell beads in ochre pigment that had been ground, mixed, and stored, a multi-step process that had to be taught. Then, around 36,000 years ago, someone painted horses, lions, and rhinoceroses on the walls of Chauvet cave in France with a level of skill that stunned researchers when the cave was found in 1994. Skill like that doesn't appear fully formed. It builds through practice and observation. The knowledge existed in the community before it existed in the individual. That's education even without a name for it. Then, around 10,000 years ago, agriculture changed everything. Humans stopped moving and started farming. A farmer needed to understand soil and seasons. A trader needed to count. A ruler needed to record laws. Once information exceeded what memory could hold, humans invented writing. And for the first time, knowledge could exist outside a human being. The first formal school in recorded history appeared in Mesopotamia around 2500 BCE. The Sumerians called it the Edubah, House of Tablets. Archaeologists found tens of thousands of clay tablets that were student homework, the same signs copied over and over, calculations, vocabulary lists, made by children who lived 4,500 years ago. But these schools weren't built for curiosity, they were built for bureaucracy. The empire needed scribes. Education had become a tool of the state, a shift we're still living inside today. Ancient Greece changed the question entirely. In 399 BCE, Socrates was executed for asking too many uncomfortable questions. He wrote nothing. His classroom was wherever two people were willing to argue. His student Plato founded the Academy in Athens in 387 BCE, a place to study philosophy and mathematics, not because they were useful to an administrator, but because they mattered for understanding reality. Aristotle arrived at 17, stayed 20 years, and later systematized nearly every branch of knowledge that still shapes academic disciplines today. Universities followed: Bologna in 1088, Oxford around 1096. Then the printing press in 1440 made books cheap enough for ordinary people, and ideas spread faster than any teacher could travel. Mass literacy became necessary. Prussia introduced compulsory state education in 1763. England followed in 1870. For the first time in history, education was something every child was required to receive. Step back and look at the distance. A child in a hunter-gatherer band copying an elder's hands without a word spoken. A student in Nippur pressing clay at sunrise because the empire needs another scribe. Aristotle walking into Plato's Academy with no idea it'll shape human knowledge for 2,000 years. A child in the 19th century Prussia sitting in a public school, not because her family chose it, but because the state required it. 4 worlds, 4 ideas about what education is for: survival, administration, understanding, compliance. Every modern school system is a mix of all 4. Here's the thing to sit with. For most of human history, education wasn't a building, it was a relationship, someone who knew something and someone who needed to know it. The institution came later. We built classrooms to make education scalable, and in solving that problem, we created another. Most kids now spend their childhoods in rooms waiting for a bell. For 300,000 years, children learned because they had to. The knowledge was tied directly to staying alive. We replaced that urgency with a system. It works, just differently than anything that came before it. The fire is still burning. We just moved it indoors, put it behind glass, and scheduled it for 45 minutes between 10 and 10:45 on Tuesdays.